Parasitic Relationship by Walter Will. A parasitic relationship is when one organism, the symbiote, benefits while the other organism, the host, is negatively impacted. In this PowerPoint, I will discuss different ways in which symbiotes can benefit in different ways hosts can be negatively impacted. Symbiotes can benefit from the parasitic relationship by gaining food. Food directly, indirectly from hosts. By directly, I mean the symbiote is feeding on the host's body. By indirectly, I mean something like the symbiote feeding on nutrients the host has obtained. An example of a symbiote getting its food directly from its host is a shellless barnacle getting its food from a smooth-handed crab. The shellless barnacle attaches itself to the crab's abdomen and feeds on the crab's tissue. The barnacle can do so through the use of rhizoids that extend and grow through the crab's body, which enables the barnacle to take food. An image of a barnacle attaching itself to a crab's abdomen can be seen on the slide. An example of a symbiote getting its food indirectly from its host is a horsehair worm getting its food from its host. A young horsehair worm can absorb nutrients from its host's bodily fluid. Symbiotes can benefit from the relationship by being able to survive. Survival is one area in which diversity of parasitic relationships can occur. Not all parasitic symbiotes require a host to survive. The symbiotes that require a host to survive are called obligatory parasites, and those that do not are called facultative parasites. An example of an obligatory parasite is Plasmodium malariae. This type of malaria relies on a host because it is unable to continue its life cycle without a host. Malaria's life cycle only starts when a mosquito, the malaria's vector, injects sporozoites into the host. The cycle occurring in the host continues until an uninfected mosquito takes the infected blood and transmits it to a new host. Symbiotes can benefit from the relationship by being able to reproduce. This is a picture of malaria, which will be talked about in the next slide. Reproduction. Some symbiotes require a host to reproduce, while others do not. Roundworms are an example of a symbiote that does not rely on a host to reproduce. Not all roundworms are parasitic, and they reproduce sexually. An example of a symbiote that relies on a host to reproduce is Plasmodium malariae. As previously mentioned, this type of malaria requires a vector to inject sporozoites to start its life cycle. Another part of its life cycle that takes place within the host is reproduction. The sporozoites move to the liver of a human host and reproduce asexually. The product of the reproduction is merozoites. Another instance where a symbiote requires a host to reproduce is barnacles in crabs. The barnacle reproduces sexually, meaning that there is a male and a female. Although two barnacles play major roles in sexual reproduction, so does the host. The female barnacle requires the host to develop and to create a brood chamber that grows out of the host. The brooding chamber is an essential component for reproduction. The brooding chamber enables the male cyprid to connect to the female barnacle and fertilize the egg. Death is one way symbiotes can negatively impact their host. Death. As discussed in class, it is uncommon for symbiotes to kill their host. The symbiote generally wants to keep its host alive since it relies on the host for vitality. Although it is uncommon for the symbiote to kill the host, there are instances where it occurs. As mentioned in class, the symbiotes that kill their hosts are called parasitoids. An instance where a symbiote kills a host is a pneumatomorpha horsehair worm. The horsehair worm's larva is parasitic and they will kill their host. The worms get ingested by the host and they feed on the host tissue and bodily fluid. Once the larva develops into juvenile, they must be released into the water. Research indicates that the young horsehair worms can influence their host enough to ensure they reach the water. The host, suicidal, jumps into the water. An image of a horsehair worm attached to its host can be seen on the slide. Death is not the only way symbiotes can negatively impact their host. On the slide is a picture of a tapeworm. I will talk about tapeworms a little on the next slide. Other negative impacts. Death is not the only way symbiotes can negatively impact their host. They can also injure and steal nutrients from their host. An example of this pertains to barnacles and crabs. Barnacles can negatively impact crabs in more ways than just eating their tissue. Barnacles can keep crabs from molting and reproducing. Also, barnacles can make crabs appear and have characteristics of females. Fleas are another instance where a symbiote can negatively impact their host other than just kill it. Fleas can negatively affect their host by biting the host, taking the host's blood, and causing the host to itch. A case where a symbiote steals nutrients from its host is a tapeworm. A tapeworm is a segmented worm that lives inside the intestines of organisms, including cows and humans. The worms feed off of food the hosts have ingested. This inhibits the host from absorbing essential nutrients in the food. Sources. My sources are listed below.